Hello. Here we are today with Melissa, who we met in person at our Kansas City event. She is coming to us from Harrison, Arkansas. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Sarah and Louise. And yes, it was a delight to meet you recently in Kansas City. And man, any adoptee who hasn't attended a in-person event, I highly suggest that you do so because to be in the room with 45 other adoptees, um, and knowing, that they have some of the same insight as you do into how we've lived our lives is really great. It was a great experience. Thank you guys for the things that you do that you put on to provide those opportunities for adoptees.
It's helpful to us too. I mean, it took me a couple days to sort of feel okay, like, oh gosh, that felt so good to be around
Mhm.
everybody, people that get me. It was kind of hard to transition back into real life.
And similarly, I realized when I was in my 50s, listening to a birth mom podcast, just some episodes that I was listening to, that in my lifetime, I had never talked to a birth mom. I had talked to lots of adoptees, I had talked to lots of adoptive parents, but I had never actually talked to a birth mom. And that was a real eye opening experience for me. And I would say that uh, one of the books that you've recently been reviewing, The Girls Who Went Away, was probably very, very influential in me coming out of the fog in my 50s. Um, other than the podcast are all helpful. I really enjoy listening to your podcast. I really enjoy a couple of others, but that book probably gave me the best insight into understanding this journey and some of the kind of a little foreshadowing here, the rejection that I've endured over the last couple of years.
Well, I wanted to say welcome as well. And you and I had a little bit of the birth mother conversation. So thank you for bringing that up because my birth mother is from Mountain Home, Arkansas, originally, which is your rival town right there. And we
Yeah.
had a nice conversation in Kansas City. So we are excited to dig in to your story because we only know surface here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
so
Well, I'm excited to share.
go ahead and start wherever you want to start.
Okay. Well, it would take me a couple of hours to tell the whole story. So you want to be sure and kind of drive me along a little bit to help with that. But, I grew up knowing I was adopted. I had great parents. My parents experienced infertility early on in their marriage, and I came along 6 years into their marriage. And then another 6.5 years later, my sister was born, and she is biological to my parents. So there's an age gap between me and my sister, and that's my only sibling that I grew up with. Mom was always very open. I could probably talk to her more about it than I could my dad, but my dad didn't really have a problem with it. He was just a different personality, just a different, quieter personality, and so I felt, uh, a better ability to, or it was easier for me to talk to my mom about it growing up. And she would tell me stories about when they brought me home. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is about a 2.5 hour drive from our home. And when they brought me home, she tells about the house being full of friends and family that was so eagerly waiting for my arrival. And I think I contribute that. And I really did grow up feeling chosen, grateful. I grew up believing it was a God given decision. My faith is very important to me, and my faith has driven a lot of how I've been able to to handle this as an adult and to actually handle the rejection that I've experienced here in the last year or so, or last couple of years. I So I always knew it was part of my identity. It was, when they would ask in group dynamic sessions in college, tell us something no one knows about you. I would say, well, I'm an adoptee. It's almost the first thing I tell people whenever they're getting to know me. So it wasn't a big deal. I never wanted to search. During that time period, I would, if you ask me, I would say, no, not interested. I have no need to find that. I've got a full life. But I was always searching in the crowd for that familiar face. I've learned coming out of the fog that mirroring is very important to me. And the mirroring, I think, has there's a lot of incidences in my life where the mirroring played a part in how I felt about my adoption and how I felt about reunion and all of those things. Yeah.
And when you say that, when did that when you decided, oh, the mirroring is important to me, were you a little bit older? Were you like, why did that happen? Was it having your children? I'm just curious, like when that switch was.
Well, I was always looking for someone who looked like me in the crowd. And we lived 7 years in Little Rock during some professional training that my husband was going through. And so in my mind, I've always thought, since I was born in Little Rock, that possibly that's where my birth mother lived and that we might cross paths.
Were you
So,
given any information about your, even, adoptive parents, particularly in that era, were say, oh, she was a young person, very, lovingly
yes,
gave you
my birth
away, was athletic, was this, was that, but no real true information. So I'm wondering if they gave you any of that stuff.
Well, since I've been able to get my original birth certificate, my OBC, my original birth certificate, I have no non-identifying information that's been provided to me. So there was nothing on file for that other than just my original birth certificate. So I don't know. It was a private adoption. There was a lawyer involved. The doctor that actually became my husband's medical partner when he got out of medical school, an older gentleman would be considered the senior partner, was the doctor who found me for my family. And he had a connection to a coworker in Little Rock who had a mother who was going to give her child up for adoption. And so that's where that connection came.
I was just thinking about this because I just received a letter from Colorado yesterday, maybe the day before, that said that they didn't have my information. I do have my original birth certificate. It was a private adoption, and my mother knew a doctor as well, and she
Mm-hmm.
worked in a doctor's office. And that's just,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many other people are out there, and that's the case. I'm going to keep
I don't
digging.
think
What,
I don't
so
think there
wait,
was a social worker
the doctor
involved in
didn't,
my case.
your husband's partner got no information, even though he facilitated this, nothing like, hey, they're just here, they have this baby, nothing beyond that. So
Right.
interesting.
But what my parents were told was that she was in college and she wanted to continue her college education and that the father didn't want to marry her. And so this was the choice that she made because it was, quote, to give me a better life and the right decision and all that. And, I'm good with that. I'm good with that dialogue. I know a lot of adoptees are not, but I truly believe my life has been what God wanted it to be. So I'm comfortable with that, with that decision. And I think one of the reasons it still has been healthy for me is because I believe that my mother, my adoptive parents were given the truth. They were told the truth because everything I've found out since seems to indicate that they were told the truth. There weren't any, she's from affluent family, and she's going to an affluent family, and all that. It seemed to be the truth. Now, there is a lie that was told at my birth, and that has affected me quite a bit. So when I got my original birth certificate in 20, I believe I got it in 2022, early
Oh,
2022.
recent.
Yes, 2017 was when the adoption laws in Arkansas changed, and somehow I missed that memo. I didn't connect that in the news or anything. So and I had searched over the years to see what the procedure was, and if I wanted to register, I could, but I had to go through a counseling session in order, their counseling session in order to fill out the forms and all that. And that was going to require me to go to Little Rock and do some things, and I just hadn't ever done that. So I got my birth certificate in 2022, and I was always, at that point, I realized that some birth moms actually named their children. So I was anxious to get that, hoping that I would find out what she wanted to name me. And it just had in the given name, baby girl. So my first name was baby girl. Boy, doesn't that feel special. And then the last name was Stewart. That's probably the only true name I'm going to publicly say here in this interview, unless I flip up. But baby girl Stewart. Well, by then I had a copy of my adoption papers that my mom had given me. I didn't get that until really late in life. And the birth mother's name was in Stewart, also on my original birth certificate. Well, as I have made this search journey, I've discovered that that was a complete lie. So the one document that places us on the earth legally, a legal and binding document, is a complete lie, because it's baby girl Stewart. Stewart is not her last name, and it is not my birth father's last name. So I guess in 1965, during the baby scoop era, you could go to the hospital, have a baby, sign your rights away to that baby, place that baby for adoption, and not really have to prove who you are, or the authorities allowed you to tell a lie. I'm not sure which one of those is the case.
Seems in aligned with that baby scoop era. Just give us your baby, no questions asked. There's lots of waiting couples needing to conform to this idea of family. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. So
how did you go about your search then? Like what besides just the marrying part, did you have, you say you came out of the fog. We've talked about that. How did that take place? Like what, because I know some twisted things have happened for you.
And also, so you went your whole life and you had your kids, and there wasn't, was it a loyalty to your parents? Was it just an acceptance of what was? Well, this is kind of God's plan, and so therefore I don't really, until it became legal, did you feel like you just didn't have agency to do so? Or I'm just curious what that storm of that.
in the early internet years, I searched on the adoption boards that you could do that, but I never really, found a connection or anything. And I think that's going to be an interesting part here when I do connect with a birth aunt down the road. So remind me to come back to that. But I was when I was raising my children, or actually, let me back up. When I was 18, where, legal adult age, and people would ask me, I consciously knew that the birth mother was probably raising her family at that time. And I knew that that could potentially throw a wrinkle into the life that she had created, possibly with a husband that was not my birth father, that kind of thing. So I consciously knew that. Then I was raising my family. I had great grandparents on both sides, my in-laws, my adoptive parents. They were awesome grandparents, and we chose to move back home to raise our children near them. And so I didn't want to mess up that dynamic by inserting an extra set of grandparents into my children's lives. So I never chose to really search diligently. From time to time, I'd get on those adoption boards and that kind of thing. Curiosity would get me. But when my adoptive father started having health problems in his 80s, it really occurred to me that time was running out. I was in my 50s, and it occurred to me that time was running out. And if I ever had a hope to be able to meet or connect with my birth parents, now would be the time. And so that's when I submitted DNA. When I submitted DNA, I had a close match within the first 4 or 5 months, and that was discovered was on the father's side, and it was a half brother. And he was an only child, and he was very curious, would be how I would describe him. And we would message through the message board. And this was in kind of middle 2019. And we would message, and he would say, I have a relationship with my father, but I don't have the kind of relationship with him that I can have a conversation with him. Our family dynamics just wouldn't allow me to bring this up. And I respected that. And he continued to say he wanted to meet, but there was never an urgency to, I would maybe suggest a date or a time or a place. And he had lived his adult life in St. Louis, Missouri. And so that's just about, 4.5 hour drive from here, an easy thing to do a weekend trip. So, it wasn't going to be a big deal. Well, COVID hit, and COVID became the excuse. And then there were other excuses. And then finally, in late 2021, I said, I really would like to meet you. And there were no close matches on the mother's side that I could find. And I said, I'll make it easy for you. My husband and I will drive to St. Louis. We'll meet at a restaurant, just sit down and visit. And so he and his wife and my husband and I met for a meal, kind of, in that area. Spent a couple of hours visiting, had a really great visit. And I could tell that he told me some things about, his grandparents that were very interesting, and his dad, my birth father's life. My birth father was retired military at this point. He was a fighter pilot. He served in 3 wars, something that I'm very patriotic. It's something that I very much respect and admire about his life, and would love to know more about it. But I satisfied his curiosity in that meeting. We took some pictures. It was nice. We continued to message each other from time to time. I would send him congratulations. His kids were in high school and, following their careers and that kind of thing. All that went wonderful, but I could tell, surface. And then later I had an opportunity to be in St. Louis, and I sent him a message and said, hey, I'm going to be in St. Louis this weekend. Would you like to get together? And I could tell it was just an excuse, and it was no. He told me in that meeting, you do what you can. You do what you need to do, but I can't have a conversation with my father.
And Melissa, so this whole time, like, he's not introducing you to the dad, but are you doing sort of, I mean, I do this too. So are you doing I don't want to disrupt and go around him now that I have this connection, and because he's speaking sort of for the father, even though the father's not speaking about it, he's kind of making that decision for you, correct?
Right. Yes. And I realized that. And in late 21, I wrote a letter to the father. I had to actually, it was the second letter I had written to the father, but this one I sent where he had to sign. I wanted, because, in my family, the women get the mail. So, did his wife pick it up, intercept the first letter, or whatever. So I sent it to, sent a letter to him, and I sent the birth brother a message. I said, FYI, I have mailed your dad a letter.
Oh.
He came back and said, great, sounds good. Well, then, crickets, no, nothing for months, 2, 3 months, nothing. And I would still send him little blurbs, about his kids, but I got to noticing he wasn't answering them.
Where was your father living?
He was retired in a retirement state that you would consider, normal retirement state.
Gotcha. Florida.
Yeah, one of those. And, the birth brother was still living in St. Louis.
Mm.
So I then reached out through a social media messenger and said, hey, I hadn't heard, to the birth brother. I said, hey, I haven't heard, you haven't responded to any messages or anything. Is everything okay? And he came back with a really long message. And Louise, I think I shared that with you, and basically said my parents, he didn't say my father, he said my parents didn't appreciate you accusing my father of shirking
Oh,
his responsibilities. And which I didn't do. And you guys have a copy of the letter that I sent, so you could, you could confirm that that's not what that letter says. And he said, and thank you for throwing me under the bus and telling him that we had met. And I looked at the letter. I, went back immediately. All I had said in the letter was, I've reached this conclusion by DNA testing. I have spoken with your son, and we thought that possibly you didn't know of my existence, which could very likely be the case, but I have since received some information that maybe you did. Either way, I'm calling to connect for health or not calling, I'm writing to connect for health reasons, and I'm writing because I would greatly desire an opportunity to meet you for a casual meal just to learn more about each other. I mean, and the letter was very, it was your typical adoptee introduction letter that we've all written.
Yeah, so you didn't say, "Oh, we hung out in a diner and had dinner," and any of that. Like he was just, but there's is touchy with his father, your father. I mean, and I go on because I know there's more to this.
Yeah. Well, so it was obvious to me he hadn't read the letter, so I sent him the letter so that he could read it. And then I told him, and in the message, he said, it appears that you've had a really good life. He said, why don't you just go live it and let us put ours back together, because this has been very devastating in our family.
this was your brother or the father?
Brother.
Okay.
I've
Okay.
never had contact with my birth father. He
Mm.
has completely ignored every reach out.
For now, it is pretty still, it hasn't been that long. You never know what will happen down the line,
Right. Exactly. And I realize that, and I go, and that's the direction that I go with that.
I find it interesting because, just for listeners out there, if you're having someone contact you, not everybody wants, this is so long ago. I just still get marveled over how people are so, oh my gosh, you're 18, 19, whatever. I mean, is it?
Yeah. And I've always known it was a sign of the times, and I understand the shame. I mean, I am a Christian, and I have values, and I totally understand how that would be devastating, even in those times. Now, I don't agree with the way society did that then, And I think that we're better at adoptions now in our society, but I don't know that we're not there yet. But I do think we're better than we were during the baby scoop era.
I'm not so sure if
And
you read current stuff like Relinquished: The Politics of Adoption and the Privilege of American Motherhood by Gretchen Sisson. We covered that. It isn't better.
yeah, well,
So
and I am my daughter has an adopted child, and it is the transracial adoption, and my daughter has done a tremendous amount of research on how to handle that. I think she has a full grasp on how to handle, or that she know a full grasp that there will be challenges that she's going to have to work through with my precious granddaughter that I love so much. She is the third daughter, with the first two being biological to my daughter and son-in-law. And but I feel a tremendous responsibility as an adoptee and her grandmother to be there for her and to help her through that. Her birth mom was going to place her for adoption. I mean, that was the decision that the birth mom made.
well,
And so
let's
I
not tell
feel
her
fortunate.
story. Let's
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
totally,
so
totally. I
so
understand.
you so this is where it's at with your father. Has there been any movement on finding your mother?
Well, in early 2022, I had a close match that I could tell was on the mother's side. This was in 23andMe, and I also submitted Ancestry.com. And there were about 5 things that happened all right together that led me to be able to discover my birth mom. There's a lot of details involved with that. I'd be happy to visit with anyone about that. But basically, I connected with a search angel who was able to put the pieces together from that close match. That close match was a first cousin that ended up being her father. What is my first cousin. Whenever we did the research on that, and his family plays a pivotal role in all of this, in the connection. So let me see how I can skip over some of that for time's sake. The search, my search angel named Gabby, who just likes to put real life puzzles together. He's not necessarily an adoptee search angel designation. I just call him that because that's what the adoptee world calls him. He just was a really good connection. But he told me, he said, I've discovered where your mom is, because her sister had passed away, and through obituary and marriage announcements that were in the newspaper, it indicated that my birth mother's sister and her family lived in Little Rock, Arkansas during the middle 60s. Convenient for a sister, a single sister, who found herself pregnant, to be able to be sent away. So I'm grateful that my birth mother didn't have to go to an unwed mother's home during that time frame. So she lived with her sister and their family. So that's what put me in Little Rock, and where, that path of my life has always been Little Rock. So,
Melissa, did you
yes,
find,
Louise.
so did they find when you were doing this research, so she went to Little Rock, she wasn't from Little Rock. Now, and then how did she meet your birth father? Where was that? I'm just curious.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's a good piece of that. My birth father grew up in St. Louis, and so did my birth mother. They, from some of the pieces, I think they were high school sweethearts, but I was 20, or they were 20 when I was born in 1965, and they were both in college. he went to a college elsewhere in the state of Missouri, and she went to college right there in St. Louis. Well, I was born in May, which means I was probably conceived August, September timeframe. And so I don't know because I've not been able to ask this question, but I would assume maybe it was a reunion, summer romance reunion after, a freshman year away from each other. I'm not sure about that exactly. But anyway, all of my family roots now seems to be in the St. Louis area. In fact, I have met and connected with the birth brother on the mother's side, and that'll be, a little bit part of this story moving forward. But he actually only lives about a mile from where my birth brother on my father's side lives. To my
Interesting.
knowledge, they don't know each other, but they live very, very close to one another. So I have met my birth brother on my father's side and my birth brother on my mother's side. I have not met my birth father at all. I've already told that story. My birth mother, I have met. So I'll try to fast forward a little bit through that, because this is the part that is, I think, the most interesting. It's really fascinating. It's really sad. It's been very deep in my psyche in living my life. I chose, when I discovered where my birth mother was after my experience on the dad's side, I chose to write 3 letters. The birth mother, I discovered, had 2 daughters and a son. And I thought through the female connection that would be very important. And so I wrote those three letters, letting each letter know that that I had sent the other 2 letters. And I thought that would ensure that they had to talk to one another. And so 2 sisters and the mother. I was going to see. Give me just a second. Sorry, guys. Okay, so within a week of those letters being written, I got an email from one of her daughters, and I'm going to call her a birth sister. I'll use the letter C to reference her, but I got a letter from C, and it was very short and to the point. We'll have to discuss this with our mom. She obviously didn't want this to come out. We've had no knowledge of any children born before us. She does have some health issues. She has MS, Parkinson's, and some dementia. We've talked to her. She has no memory of having children before us. And by the way, who is the father? And don't call us, we'll call you if she wants us to. So that was pretty much that I got back. I offered to have a conversation with her over the phone to explain how I had arrived at this, but she came back and said, no, not at this time. I discovered that she is about only 4 years older than my own daughter. So she was the birth mother had her very late in life, and I am 15 to 16 years older than her oldest of the 3 that she kept, of the 3 siblings that she kept. So there was a big gap there, even though she married her husband and stayed and lived with him her whole life until his death. And but anyway, so radio silence for another week or 2, and then I randomly get an email from the first cousin's wife, where the match was in the 23andMe.
The original. Yeah.
Um,
So the first
and
cousin's wife, not your cousin, the wife.
yeah,
That's so
yeah,
weird.
and I
Okay,
think
go
it
on.
was just the female, again, female connection. I'm not sure. So um, in her email, she says you are correct in your email or in your letter to, and uh, this is my husband's aunt, and she is your birth mother. Her daughters aren't taking this very well. We hope that they'll change their mind, but we welcome you with open arms into our family. And we are hoping and
Aw.
praying that the girls will change their minds. Um, let's connect and talk, which we do. We visit. She highly encourages me to reach out to her father-in-law, who was because her mother-in-law had already passed away, which would be the birth mother's sister. Her father-in-law, reached out, and we connected, and he and I talked. His comments to me, we had a wonderful visit. It's time that this came out in the open. We received a call in 1964 from N's mother. N is my birth mother, um, and the birth mother's mother made all of the decisions. He and we
Very
were told,
typical for that era.
right. We were told to come get her because she wasn't welcome to be in her home anymore.
Mm.
So
Melissa,
this,
did
yes.
they the cousin's wife that's writing you, did
Mhm.
she they prove this with the sisters, like dementia or not, we know this happened. So they're now knowing you
Mhm.
are the sister.
Yes,
Okay.
they are. Yes, they are. But notice that the sister that sent me the email never acknowledged that connection. She said, she kept saying my mother doesn't remember, and we don't, we've never heard of this, and all this. So it was the brother-in-law. It was the birth mother's brother-in-law, which would be my uncle, confirmed it within the family by having some conversations with everyone.
And Melissa, are
So
you saying the birth mother to create an emotional safety net for yourself? Because she is your birth
probably
mother. And you
she is.
keep using it and it kind of throws me when you say that. So,
Well, and I'm just trying to be clear because I know, these relationships, it's hard to understand that. But I have chosen, I know a lot of people use first mothers, and I think that I would be okay with a recognition of her being a mother, if there's been some better connections, I think. But it's still, to me, it is my birth mother, and my adoptive parents are my mom and dad. And
but
I know other adoptees feel different about that.
I
Yeah.
wasn't speaking about the term birth mother. I was speaking of, instead of saying mine, you say the to sort of, so I don't even know if you're aware of that.
I'm probably not. I'm probably not. I will use I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but I am also trying to, make the story clear too. So
Yeah.
there is an aspect of that. Yeah,
And
Louise.
so just in the essence of time, because we want to,
Yeah.
I kind of know a little bit more that's happened,
Mhm.
why you might be
Mhm.
feeling a little bit of
Yes,
distance.
please
So feel
do.
that.
Mhm. Yes. So, um, I asked Gabby to send the birth sister, the one I call C, an email because maybe a third party could help connect. She came back immediately to me in that email and said, um, quit trying to reach out to us and don't speak. And I'm greatly disturbed that you have reached out to other family members and violated my mother's privacy. Now, I've told the story here. Who have I reached out to in this story? Louise, Sarah, who have I reached out to? I've only written 3 letters on the birth mother side, one to the birth mother and to her 2 daughters. Those are the only people I've reached out to. The rest of them have reached out to me. And so I waited a little bit, but then I sent the cousin a message and I said, I just want you to know I got this email back from C, and this is what she said, and that's why you haven't heard from me. And she immediately came back and said she has no right to say that. You can talk to me anytime you want to. And in fact, we were planning a meeting, and I have met them. And it really made her mad. She said, you need to reach out to your birth brother. I said, I can't. At this point, I will alienate the daughters. I said, I can't. She said, well, but you need to. And I said, well, I can't. Well, within about 24 to 48 hours, I had a call from 3 more family members.
Wow.
I had a call from the birth brother. Immediately, he said, I knew about all this, but they would not give me your contact information. My sisters wouldn't give me your contact information, so I didn't know how to call you. I received a call from Aunt MJ, who is my birth mother's sister. And then I also received a call from another first cousin, which was on the other side of the family. So at this point, I've connected by telephone or messaging to 5 family members that are not any of the 3 that I originally sent the letter to. And if you notice, they all contacted me. I didn't reach out to any of them, as I was accused of doing in that email. And so the Aunt MJ, who has been wonderful, the first words that she said to me was, I searched for you.
Is this the aunt where your birth mother stayed while she was pregnant?
No, it's the 3rd sister.
Oh, okay.
The 3rd sister, who was still living at home in St. Louis. The other aunt has passed away.
Okay.
And the passing away is part of what allowed us to connect the dots in the story. So Aunt MJ said, I've searched for you, but I didn't know if you were a boy or a girl. When your mother came back from delivering you, came back from Little Rock and came back into the home and back into college, we weren't allowed to talk about it. And I've never had a conversation with her since. So in 1965, all the way through till 2022, she had never talked to her sister about it. Can you imagine, as a birth mom, not being able to talk to those close to you about what you have just gone through? But the family was highly instructed not to talk about it, and so they didn't. Now, Aunt MJ says that Nancy made the decisions and that Nancy decided to place me for adoption. And Nancy has told me that it was a hard decision. Oh, I said the name. It was a hard decision, and but once she made it, she felt certain that she had made the right.
So you have talked to her?
I have talked to her.
Oh, yeah. So please tell us about that.
So let me
Nancy's your
jump
grandmother,
forward
though,
here.
right? Isn't Nancy your grandmother?
No.
No, she's the birth mom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Aunt MJ had not seen Nancy because Nancy had been moved to another town a couple of hours away and was living in an assisted living facility because of her MS. And because of COVID and the distance, she had not been to see her. So she went to visit her after she had this conversation with me. And Aunt MJ has sent me a birthday card every year, and it's from my aunt, which means a tremendous amount because it says, you're my niece. She calls me her niece, and I love that. And she sent me one every year since we connected. Well, she went to visit. She went to visit my birth mother, and she said, your daughter that you placed for adoption has surfaced, and I've talked to her. I have her phone number. Would you, because she wasn't certain if my birth mother had even knew if she even received the letter. None of us really knew. And she said, I have her phone number. Would you like to call her? And she said, yes, I would love to call her, or I would like to call her. So they called me. We had a 15 or 20-minute conversation on speakerphone that the aunt and the birth mother and I were talking. I asked, it was a wonderful conversation with my birth mother. I told her some things I wanted to tell her. She told me some things. She said, oh, I'm so glad. So glad you've had a good life. I've thought of you often, and some things like that. And I said, Nancy, do you want to meet? Would you want to meet me? And she said, yes. She said, I think we should. She said, we'll meet, we'll talk, we'll hug, and we'll see where it goes from there. And so that meant, she told me that twice throughout that conversation. So MJ gave me some information about how to reach out to her and how and where she was living. And this was in May of 2022, early May of 2022, and my birthday is May the 12th. And May the 12th falls on Mother's Day lots of times, and that's meant the world to me over the years. And especially since I've become a mother, and I thought I possibly could meet my birth mother by Mother's Day this year. But there were other plans. C had other plans for that. So when C found out that my aunt MJ had come to visit her, she called the police and had the facility place me and Aunt MJ and the cousin that initially reached out to me on a no trespassing list at the facility, where we were not going to be allowed to be at the facility.
How lonely
And
for
so the
her.
policeman,
I'm sorry, but how lonely for her too. Let me cut off her sister and her cousin
That's just
and now her
terrible. That's
daughter.
a
Yeah.
terrible, terrible thing to do.
and not only did they cut us off from visiting, but they also blocked our phone numbers. Now, I don't care that my phone number was blocked all that much, but it breaks my heart that her sister's phone number was blocked and her sister can't call her.
Hmm.
And
And
so
is
they
this still the case?
Mm-hmm. It
This
is.
is wrong.
And there's
Yeah.
no like have they talked to Nancy to say, is this what you want, or does she have any agency in this? I mean, I wonder if there's a
Well,
way her sister could.
according to the policeman who called me, that she, and according to my birth brother, who I've met and have a good relationship with. I wouldn't say close, but good. And he's been very welcoming. We've met 2 or 3 times. We continue to communicate. I send his children birthday and Christmas presents and talk to them, sometimes FaceTime. So that's all good. But he doesn't have a really good relationship with his sister because of just some other things that have happened in the family unrelated to this. So he's told me he doesn't have any, he has said numerous times, I don't have any influence. I can't help to make that connection, because if I do, I risk losing the ability to visit my own mother. And he said, I just, she's late in life, and I can't do that. So I came to the realization that if I was going to have an opportunity to meet my birth mother, it was going to have to be taken. I mean, I was going to have to be very brave. And so I had a conversation with my husband, who has been supportive, but at the same time disconnected from this process, because he doesn't want me to be hurt. He told me one time, he said, I'm afraid this is going to change you. And I said, well, too late. It already has changed me. And there's no going back at this point. So he had been supportive but disconnected from this process. He would listen when I talked about it, but wouldn't bring it up. So I told him one day, I said, I've got to have you help me with something. And this is where I'll cry. But I said, I've got to be brave. And at this time, I knew that they had moved the birth mother, my birth mother, to another facility. And I had not received any notice from police that I couldn't go there or anything. And so I told my husband, I said, we've got to go there. We've got to walk in. We've got to ask to meet her. I said, I fully recognize we may drive all that way and be turned around and come back. Well, we walked in and he asked, I told him, I said, I can't talk. So he asked to meet where her room was, told us where her room was. It's down this wing through this here's the code to get through this wing right here. And when we walked in, I knew it was around dinner time, and I knew there would be a lot of cameras in the facility, which I was grateful for. I really wanted those. And there was a woman sitting all alone. Now, there were other people in the dining room in groups sitting together, but she was sitting all alone. And I said, I think that's her. And he asked one of the aides there, is this, Mrs. So-and-so, without utilizing her full name. And they said yes. And so I went over to her, I approached her, and I leaned down as you would somebody sitting in a chair, but to lean down to get eye level. And I talked to her. I said, Nancy, my name is Melissa, and this is my husband, Ken. And we've come to visit you. I talked to you a year or so ago, and you indicated you wanted that you were willing to visit with me. You're someone I've always admired. You're someone I've always loved. I've heard of the fact that you are a teacher, or that you were a teacher, that you were a beloved teacher. I was a teacher too in the early years of my adult life, and that's a connection. And so, we were just very surface. And I looked up at my husband, who was standing off out of the way, and I said, should I? And he said, yes, you should. And I turned back to her and I said, Nancy, I am the daughter that you placed for adoption in 1965. And she said, her reaction was, oh, and she smiled. And I said, I don't want this to be upsetting to you. If it is, I will leave. But I said, I've just always wanted to meet you. I've loved you my whole life. I felt close to you my whole life, even though I've never met you. You told me a year and a half ago that we would meet, that you wanted to meet me. And I said, I'm just here. And I said, I want this to be a positive experience for both of us. I want it to be upsetting for you. And she said numerous times, oh, this is not upsetting. I am so happy. I am so happy you did this. This is so good for me to know how you've lived your life and everything. And then I said, and I was still bent down in front of her, and I said, Nancy, you told me when I talked to you on the phone that we would meet, we would talk, we would hug. So do you still want that hug? And she said, oh, yes. And so I stood up to lean over her, to hug. And she said, no, I want to stand up to be on your level. She said, give me a second. I have MS and it takes me a minute to get my balance. And she stood up, she positioned herself with the table, using the table that was there. And she turned to me, and it was the hug that everybody dreams of having with their birth mother. And we cried. It was all good, happy tears. We cried. We hung on to each other for a while. And then when that was over, she sat back down. I walked around and sat on a banquette that was behind the table beside her, and my husband sat there. And we talked a little bit more. She looked over at my husband. She said, Ken, what do you do for a living? So she remembered his name that I had said at the very beginning. And we asked to take a picture, which we did. And she was very happy with the picture. I sent you in an email that picture. I don't know
Mhm.
if you've looked at it,
Yeah.
but what would be your assessment of that picture?
Well, she's happy. And so, of course, I'm guessing that they blocked you again and she didn't want
Well,
this. I can see.
I hope
Yeah,
you,
well,
oh, okay, go on. We,
well, we spent an hour there. One of the last things she said to me was, the next time you visit, we'll get a plan because I've never told my children. I didn't, she told me about her children. I told her about my children and grandchildren, showed her pictures. And she never, I never told her that I had met her son. I didn't tell her that. But she said, the next time you visit, I said, Nancy, I said, I'm not going to be able to call you. I said, I won't be able to call you. So if you need to get a message to me, you need to let your niece know. And she said, well, I don't know how to call my niece. She said, how to call anybody but my daughter. She said, I wish somebody would write everybody's phone numbers down so I could call and visit with them sometimes. And I said, well, okay, well, I said, I'll have your niece call you. And that way you'll have her phone number. And she said, okay, that'd be good. I said, is that okay? I said, I know her. Is that okay? She said, oh yeah, that'd be great. That'd be fine. And I said, now, if you want to tell your children, I said, that's your choice. You tell them if you want to or if you don't. And so we ended our visit. It was all very pleasant. Took pictures that we asked her permission to take, and then we left. It's a long drive from where this is, and as I was arriving back in to my home, my phone rang, and it was the police from
oh
that
my gosh,
town.
Melissa. Oh boy. Well, there's so much we could keep going on and on. It sounds like this is just going to be an ever evolving thing, and she wants to know you and have you in her life. And I just hope there's a way for this to happen for you. But it sounds like the story isn't over. So
Yeah,
maybe there's a
I would
way
like
to,
to think.
yeah.
I would like to think that it's not, that I really had a strong feeling that day that that would probably be the last time I would see
Mm.
her. I still have connection with all of the other family members who have reached out to me. But in the conversation with the police, he said, I'm not going to have a need to call you again. You've done nothing wrong. He in the interview, he said, is it your husband's assessment that this was a positive meeting? I said, absolutely. He's right here. Talk to him. He told the policeman that. He said, I want to make something very clear. He said, we're financially stable. You can ask anyone in our community. They will know us by our good reputation. You can interview anyone for a character. And he said, and the daughter that you're talking to, she has never once reached out to my wife to have a conversation with her about this and her concerns about this. And this has been her prerogative to do so. She's chosen the police every time, which I don't understand, to try to, cause that division. And the police officer in the police report stated later that the facility had, when they interviewed the person at the facility said, I'm not sure if her visitors were upsetting to her or the phone call that she had with her daughter was
Mm.
upsetting to
I would
her.
wager to guess the second. Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, this was a very intensive, deep conversation, and
Yeah.
I hope you keep us posted on what
Yeah.
is to come. And we really thank you for telling your story. It's just, I know it's vulnerable to do so
Yeah,
and
very.
painful. So
And I know you're needing to end because of time, but I want to pull the mirroring back together. The part about the mirroring to kind of end that. You know, that is so important to adoptees, I believe. And I do look like her. And I will tell you that when I held my daughter in my arms for the first time, I wanted so desperately for her to look like me. And I carried, and I was upset anytime anyone would say that my daughter looked like anybody other than me. And I never really understood why I felt that way. But as I have gone through this reunion, that is exactly it. I wanted my own children to look like me desperately. And the birth mother said, you know, she has my birth mother has brown eyes, and she said, you know, my children didn't get my brown eyes. They all had blue eyes. And I looked at her and I said, but this daughter got your brown eyes.
Oh,
And that means
aw,
to me.
I like
aw,
that.
She,
Yeah.
yeah, and she just smiled. It made her so happy.
oh, I'm so
So
glad.
Yeah.
yeah. So
Thank
So
anyway,
you.
I wanted to tie that. I wanted to tie that mirroring back
I like
Yeah, I
that.
like
into our
that.
conversation.
Thank you so much. what
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
really
Thank you for
appreciate.
all you guys do. And I
Thank
know
you.
this is a big dedication for y'all to spend your time doing this. And it is so helpful. It is
Melissa,
so helpful
thank
to
you.
adoptees.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful to
Thank
us
you.
too. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Talk
Sounds
soon.
good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
keep in
Bye bye.
touch.
Bye.